There are those who say that there is one force that surrounds and penetrates the galaxy, and that makes everything intelligible. But Marx said that that's really just class conflict. Hi everyone, it's Professor Dan here with the latest installment of videos that Professor Dan makes to take the place of giving actual lectures, because we're not giving actual lectures where I can see your face, so you can see my face, and this is probably pretty much the same. Today we're going to talk about Marx. Specifically, we're going to talk about some basic stuff from the Communist Manifesto. Now, lots of people have heard about Marx. He's the person who Satan sent to the world to turn everybody away from the glories of capitalism, which the baby Jesus had decreed should be the way that everything goes, and why do you hate freedom? Marx founded something called socialism, although there were other people who were also founders of socialism. Socialism basically works this way. What it says is, whatever a society has, and that includes people, the people in society, they should contribute what they can. He said that from each according to ability. Everybody should contribute what they can, and everybody should get what they need. From each according to ability, to each according to need. Not very different at all at first look from what Plato talks about in the Republic with one man, one job. There's an important difference though, and this difference comes about if we look at the way that Marx sets all this up. So to understand this, we have to understand what it comes from. To understand where socialism comes from and trying to create a better world for people than what came before, we have to understand capitalism. And Marx thought capitalism was sort of the pinnacle of what he called class conflict. Marx reads the whole history of the world as a struggle between people of different classes. And when capitalism comes around, we end up with two distinct groups of people. You have the bourgeois. They're the people who own stuff. And you have the proletariat, and they're the people who work for the bourgeois. Now, the most difficult concept or thing that you have to do in Marx is spell bourgeois and proletariat. So if you get kind of close, that'll be fun. These are the two groups that emerge under capitalism. And everybody ends up in one or another of these groups. Once upon a time, there were lots of groups of people. There were noble lords and priests and guildsmen and all these other different people. But when capitalism comes around, and what capitalism does is it says, right, what capitalism does is it says that everything can be translated into money some way or another. Everything gets translated into money according to capitalism, and so this leads to the construction of these two classes right here, the bourgeois and the proletariat. Unfortunately, for most people, the proletariat is where they end up finding themselves. And the bourgeois gets smaller and smaller. People in the bourgeois fight amongst themselves to each get more and more ownership of the various parts of society that produce things, what Marx called the modes of production. So this shrinks and gets more stuff. This expands and gets less stuff. So as a result, the proletariat is supposed to, according to Marx, develop something called class consciousness. That is, the proletariat becomes aware of this whole scheme. And they become aware of this whole scheme because as this class structure takes over more and more, people fall into the proletariat who are able to analyze this. Various educated persons, school teachers and college professors and authors and poets and other sort of educated people come to realize the truth of all of this. And when that happens, we end up with a revolution. And this revolution, according to Marx, is inevitable because the bourgeois cannot stop themselves. They have to always grasp for more and more. They have no way of controlling themselves. They try sometimes, and here's something interesting that he thinks might happen, but he doesn't believe it will really take hold for long. The bourgeois might, from time to time, actually give a little more to the proletariat so that the proletarian life is not so terrible. Right? The proletariat lives in squalor while the bourgeois lives in luxury, and every once in a while the bourgeois will give a little bit to the proletariat, and then their lives will be a little bit better, and they'll stop this progression towards revolution. But Marx thought that the bourgeois, they can't keep that up for long because they always have to come after more and more stuff. Even though they can't do anything with all the stuff they have to keep going after it. And so this creates the huge proletariat, which becomes conscious, and then leads to revolution. And the revolution takes us around back to this right here, where everybody has what they need. Now, there are some people who are going to say, well, gee, I don't remember any communist country being really particularly wealthy. Marx wasn't talking about anybody being particularly wealthy, but he thought that once the revolution happened, then everybody would have enough stuff, that there was enough stuff to go around, and then everybody would have enough. But that amount is going to be basically the same. So if you're a doctor after the revolution, living by yourself, you get stuff for one person. If you are a maintenance worker after the revolution with a large family, you get stuff for the large family. Of course, everybody in that family is also going to contribute however they can contribute, and so at the end of the day, everybody contributes something, whatever it is that they can contribute. So it's kind of like Plato in that regard. The big difference, though, is that everybody is equal and everybody has an equal say in the society. There's not a class structure like we have in Plato with guardians who run the show but don't have stuff, and craftsmen who don't run the show but who do have stuff. Everybody has the same amount of stuff, and everybody supposedly has the same input, but once we have class consciousness, then everybody knows what to do, and everybody just acts all the same anyway. So under Marx, you end up with, essentially, you end up with an absolute equality. Right? That's what you end up with under Marxism. So that's how this works in a nutshell. So that's Plato, and now that's Marx. And so in our last video, we will see what Rawls does, but that means we have one more video to make. So that's it for this video. One more video to go, and then we will be all done.